government relies on state and local personnel to protect against terrorist attacks. Very important, sort of obvious, okay? Not really, I don't want to make it general, it's important, right? Terrorism and safeguarding us starts at, first responders, men on the ground. Next page, 26, number 4. Some Homeland Security information is needed by the state and local personnel to prevent and prepare, remember we talked about preparedness, I spent the last probably hour and a half of the series talking about preparedness and the impact that preparedness is going to have in combating 21st century terrorism. It's going to be huge, 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 right? So some Homeland Security information is needed. Now, if you think about the wording of this, it seems, and this is actual law, right? Some Homeland Security information is needed by the state and local personnel. You need to get some of this information. So we have Homeland Security info. And this is the totality of Homeland Security info. They need to have a bit of that information, not all of that. And they use that bit of information to go get the bad guys. They, obviously, they being local personnel, don't recognize how this bit relates to the overall whole. But they do recognize how that bit relates to the overall whole in getting the bad guy. So, if you read it, some Homeland Security information is needed by state and local personnel and to prevent and prepare for a terrorist attack, right? So, you might not know why this information is relevant. This information that we're giving you is being given under confidence that it is part of the blah 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 state and homeland security Make sure you keep your eye out for X. This you can send to the public, this you keep with in-house, blah blah blah. So you get the idea. Okay. Number 5. The need of the state and local personnel to have access to relevant Homeland Security information, what I just discussed, to combat terrorism must be reconciled with the need to preserve and protect the status of such information and to protect the source and method used to acquire such information. What does 5 mean? Well, imagine that we have 5 is information that we can release, and it being black. So the white part you can release, the black part you can't release. So obviously there's going to be more of the information that's confidential and secure than we can release. And then of the stuff that we can release, so of the stuff that can be released, that information is itself going to be separate because we're giving local law enforcement the authority to release the blue part to the public, and the rest can't be released to the public. So that the public, right, John and Jane Doe, me and you, we only get the blue part. So we get the fraction of of what was released, right? Which is exactly why everybody was stunned in the news media when the president announced that he and his administration had successfully killed Osama bin Laden, right? So insofar as that was done, insofar as that objective was undertaken, we realize just how little, and it was a real good sense in which the media and all the pundits and the Fox people and even MSN and CNN and all those people really got a dose of humility, right? It's sort of like, you know, the back and forth with all the riffraff. The grand scheme is, rightfully so, that those in power are using their intelligence and their information to secure the United States of America as they see fit, right? And the news media, you know, the best thing to do is to engage in constructive discourse. But this back and forth and all this, you know, as President Obama says, all this silly season stuff, you know, that's not going to be productive, right? So that information, part of that information that's been released, I would imagine would be the public can get this bit, don't release this information to the public, use that information to go out carrying your investigation and relay your findings back up to us. But this is sort of how the information is disseminated, right? With respect to overarching structure of intelligence. Remember, again, we're talking about the interdepartmental, interagency cooperation. And you can see how the interagency cooperation between local law enforcement and the bureaucrats is important, right? And how that relationship unfolds will be the source of the discussion for in a couple minutes. Next point, number 6, granting security clearances to certain state and local personnel is one way to facilitate the sharing of information. So particular members of local law enforcement will be selected, will be appointed, will gain access to get maybe little more pieces of this information. Maybe all of this info won't be available to all of local law enforcement, it probably won't be, but select members of the local law enforcement, so that if we look at local law enforcement as a population, then a small portion of local law enforcement will get access to the small portion that is available. Okay. Jumping down to 10, agencies must act in partnership, right? Partnership. Agencies must act in partnership to maximize the benefits of information gathering and analysis to prevent and respond to terrorist attacks. Partnership is what's key. Cooperation is what's key. Coordination is what's key, right? That idea of coordination is absolutely essential. Number 12, increased efforts to share Homeland Security information should avoid duplicating existing information systems. That's exactly what I drew up there, right? Read it again. Increased effort to share Homeland Security information should avoid duplicating existing information systems, right? The idea of duplicating existing information systems is a long sort of jargon-filled way of saying overlap. Let's cut down the overlap, right? We don't want to duplicate stuff that's already there, so if you have an information system and it's working, and it's operational and it's up, we're not going to invest dollars to create a new system when we could just co-opt into your system. That's basically how it works. Which makes sense. I mean, this is good business practice. 12C, with special emphasis on hard-to-reach urban and rural communities, right? With special emphasis on hard-to-reach rural and urban communities. It was when I read this that an idea popped into my head. And if you turn to page 27, you'll see my example of what I'm calling, this is an analogy, and I think it should work, right? An example of what I'm calling enhanced coverage, right? So, an example of enhanced coverage. And what does this mean? I copied and pasted these images, and they're actually from like Verizon or AT&T's map of America, where they say, you know, AT&T is the network with all the coverage, and Verizon says, no, Verizon is the network with all the coverage, and they showed the map of the United States. And what's really, really important about this map of the United States and AT&T's coverage of the map and Verizon's coverage of the map, and why I think the United States of American government needs to adopt this concept of coverage, is that it's so easy to understand. It's so easy to understand. A 4-year-old can understand it. But not only is it important that a 4-year-old can understand it, it pertains to our discussion of interagency cooperation. In order for Verizon to, I used to be a trainer for Verizon Wireless way back in the day, before I became an academic. And so I was one of the first trainers for, because I used to work for Primeco, and then they merged into Verizon. I was one of the first trainers for Verizon Wireless corporate. You know, I did the spiel and whatever. It was a great job. It was a great job at the time. And I'm not going to go into all of that. But if you're thinking of a geographic area, cell towers have a certain range. I'm not going to get into it now, right? But cell towers have a range. So here's the range of this cell tower. And then obviously if I'm designing my coverage, I recognize that my range is limited. So what I want to do is I want to put another cell tower sort of close. And obviously there'll be a little overlap. So strength here will be really, really good. Strength here will be really, really weak. And I go on until I fill up the map of the United States of America, right? So this is how it works. We recognize in building cell towers that there is going to be overlap. It's undeniable. Because what ends up happening is if I build a cell tower here and I build a cell tower here, a little too far away, and my map is like this, then I have an area of a community that doesn't have any coverage at all. So in order to what is the word I'm looking for? In order to mitigate against the problem of black spots, right? We recognize that overlap in coverage is necessary. Really, really good service if you live in the overlap. you the consumer don't have any control over if you live in an overlap area. If you live in an overlap area, it's 5 bars all day.